Hey, welcome back to the Xplor podcast with Scott and Ryan. What's going on, Scott?
Hey, what's going on, everybody? How you doing today, Ryan?
Doing good, doing good. Hey, we got an exciting episode today. We got a guest on with us. He's an investor, he's a broker owner of Copeland Morgan LLC, an investor focused real estate brokerage, and a property management company located in St. Petersburg, Florida, Tampa Bay area. He manages over 320 rental properties around that Tampa Bay area. Jeff Copeland, thanks for coming on.
Thank you
Hey,
for having me.
Jeff.
It's great to be on.
Yeah, so I found you on Bigger Pockets, and I saw you manage a lot of rental units, and us being in the real estate game and creating this podcast to talk to investors and entrepreneurs. You're running a pretty good sized business, and thought it'd be fun to kind of pick your brain.
Yeah, absolutely. I love talking real estate. Bigger Pockets has been a tremendous resource for me, as I'm sure it is for you guys and for many of your listeners. So, yeah, I'm glad we connected and happy to dive into anything you guys want to talk about.
Yeah, Jeff, I think first off, let's talk a little bit about just kind of give us a little bit about yourself. How you got into the business, kind of what motivated you to get into it, and a little bit of your background.
Yeah, it's an interesting. Well, I don't know how interesting it is, but it's a kind of diverse story because I was actually in the United States Coast Guard. I'm a military veteran. I did 12 years on active duty and 10 years in the reserves. During that time, when we moved back to Florida and we're doing the 10 years in the reserves, of course, I was working full time in addition to being a reserve officer. And we actually owned a wedding planning and photography business. My wife is a professional photographer. And my philosophy, and I helped her run it. And my philosophy was always anytime people ask us, hey, do you guys do chairs? Do you guys do arches? Do you guys do sound equipment? And I would always say, we do now. And so this photography business grew from like, one person taking photos on the beach to an actual, destination wedding planning company. And so it kind of grew to the point where it was killing us. We were working 60 hours a week, working every weekend because that's when people get married. And for a lot of reasons, we came to the decision to sell that business. And when we did so, it certainly didn't make us rich, but what it did enable us to do is pay off some debts, have a little bit of capital, and we were kind of looking at what to do next. And we said, oh, we've always wanted to flip a house. Let's do that. So this was about 2013, and we actually bought a 3-bedroom, 1-bath, single family home in Pinellas Park, Florida for I think $47,000 we paid for it. It was a foreclosure. Wow. So how times have changed.
Yeah. And what is that same house today, roughly in the same condition? What would that go for today?
I mean, it was in rough condition, but it would probably be 200K now.
Crazy.
Flip it. It's hard to adjust your thinking to some of the new price points. But so yeah, and from there we kind of got the bug as far as flipping houses is concerned. And I know that's how many people get started in real estate. You flip a house and you just love it, and you do it again and again and again, and then you realize, oh man, this is hard work. I'm still working 80 hours a week on my flip properties, and every time I sell one, it's a big, heavy, hard hitting, check to the tax man. And so we started looking for other strategies of how can we keep more of this money. So eventually, you maybe flip one, but it doesn't sell, and you say, you know what? Let's just keep it as a rental. And that's exactly what happened to us. And that kind of grew into owning more rental properties. And I got my real estate license to have a little bit more of a competitive advantage when looking for, homes to purchase. And of course, once I had my real estate license, every time people ask me, hey, do you do property management? Of course, my answer was, we do now. And so it's just kind of grown from there.
And tell us, let's go back to this first house that you bought for $47,000. Give us kind of the dynamics on that. So it was a 3-bed, 2-bath. You said, is that right?
3-1, yeah.
3-1. Sorry. You paid right around $47,000. How much did you put into it? What did you sell it for? Did you guys keep it and rent it? Give us a little bit there.
Yeah, that one we sold rather quickly as a flip. I want to say we spent somewhere around 20 to 25K on the rehab. So we were into it for under 70 all in. and I think we sold it for 107 or 117, something like that.
Wow,
So
that's
it was
really
a very
good.
successful flip. It was a beautiful house. It's still like one of my favorites because of the transformation of the house. But yeah, again, it's probably worth 3 times that now. So as great as it was for me, it was even better for the people who bought it. And
Yeah.
as far as I know, they still live there, and they have hundreds of thousands of dollars, in equity by just buying a single family primary residence. So
That's awesome. Yeah, sometimes it's really frustrating having to sell to continue to grow, but it's just something that you got to do. And I always look back at some of the houses we've sold in the past couple of years, and it hurts because you look at, man, if I would have kept that thing, it is worth a lot today.
it's funny when you're in this business for a while, 2 of your biggest regrets are, man, I wish I hadn't sold that house,
Yes.
and man, I wish I had bought that house when I
That is
could
so
have,
true. Yep. Yep, that is. We got to keep on going. But yeah, I do that constantly. And I know most investors I talk to have the same exact thing happen to them. So anyway, tell us a little bit more. So you started to flip, you got your license, you started to property manage. It sounds like the property management is something that you're pretty passionate about. So tell us kind of what your property management business looks like, why you why do you enjoy it? What kind of unique proposition do you bring to your investor clients to use you versus other property management companies?
Yeah, I'll do just a quick dive into how I got started in property management. I had a client who I actually met through Bigger Pockets. He's a CPA. He was living in New York City at the time, and he wanted to, kind of get his feet wet here in the Florida, Tampa Bay market. And they bought like a $30,000 condo in Tampa and asked me, hey, would you manage it? So that was the first unit we ever took under management, and it was successful. And I'm very fortunate that same buyer, that same client, became kind of a long-term business partner for me since that one unit. I even have a profile of him on my blog, and since that one unit, he's gone like over 100 units here in the Tampa
Wow.
Bay area. And he did that. He's at like 140 now, but when I wrote this article, he was over 100 in under 5 years. And so he was just
Ooh.
aggressively buying here in Tampa Bay. And so I was very fortunate that our businesses sort of grew alongside each other with the same trajectory. And of course, along the way, you pick up other clients and other buyers and other properties to manage. And so, yeah, I think you mentioned sort of a unique value proposition or a unique selling proposition. I talk about this almost every day with investors. I'm a big believer in that the marriage of brokerage services and property management services under the same umbrella is a huge advantage to investors who want to buy real estate. Because what I tell people all the time is, as a broker, as an agent, I am not going to sell you a headache if you just sign it over to me at closing and it becomes my headache as the property manager. And so I want you to acquire properties that are in good neighborhoods, that are going to be relatively stable and relatively easy to manage, and they're going to have a nice positive outlook in terms of appreciation and things like that. Because I learned the hard way that, I can manage 50 maybe Class B doors for the same amount of blood, sweat, tears, and hassle that it takes to manage 2, Class D doors where you're dealing with collection and vacancy and eviction issues over and over again. And so I've learned to steer clear of that as a property manager, and I've learned to steer buyers clear of that as a real estate broker. And so I think the marriage of the two it just creates a great synergy. And the other piece is we're able to tell with some level of certainty, how much would that property rent for? How much could that property rent for? And what kind of improvements is it going to take to get it there? And if you get those numbers right on the front end, it makes all the difference in the world on the back end. And so by
Yeah,
looking at it through the
absolutely.
lens of a property manager, it really helps with the analysis.
Yeah, you hit it right on the head, and that's something that in Kansas City, there's a few brokers that manage as well, and they really do have that niche really locked down and a competitive advantage. Because, like you said, they know exactly what they're looking for. They don't want to sell their clients bad houses that are going to take a lot of work to get them managed or to get them turned over. So I think that is awesome. What would you say your average turnover time is from acquisition to getting it leased up?
Well, some properties are purchased with tenants in place, and so every property is unique. Sometimes it's
Yeah.
more of a strategy of, okay, great, we've got 5 tenants, and 2 of them are month to month, and a couple of them have leases that expire in 3 or 4 months. And so it really becomes more of a unit by unit strategy of, okay, we're going to terminate this month to month tenancy. We're going to renovate this unit and we're going to raise the rent. And then, 2 months later when this lease expires. And so, that's one strategy that a lot of investors employ, because you try to preserve as much cash flow as possible. And of course, I would be referring to like a small multifamily in this scenario.
Mm-hmm.
Try to preserve the cash flow with the occupied units and turn them over one at a time and sort of ratchet up the rents one at a time. Occasionally, depending on how much of a spread there is between the existing legacy tenants and the types of rents you're trying to get, sometimes that gap is just too wide, and it makes more sense to do more of a, everybody out. We've got to renovate the whole building. And it's sometimes tough to put a $2,000 tenant next door to an $800 tenant. Those would be very opposite ends of the spectrum. In terms of socioeconomic status and things like that. So it's really a case-by-case strategy, and it depends on the investor and their funding and their timeline and their goals and everything else.
Yeah, no, you hit that again on the head. So what kind of buy box are you looking for most of your investors? Do you guys have a niche product that you're looking for, or is it just kind of all over the box down there? Do you have a particular neighborhood you really like to focus on?
Yeah, so we cover what most people refer to as the Tampa Bay area, which is really the three anchor cities are Tampa, St. Petersburg, and Clearwater. We're located in St. Petersburg, but we're literally like across the bridge, from Tampa. So it's all the same real estate market in a lot of ways. In terms of our wheelhouse, probably my favorite space to operate in is kind of that small to medium multifamily. And I would say, 5 to 15 units on the commercial side, maybe even a little bigger, 5 to 20. And what I've found is you kind of fly below the level of the institutional investors, but you're flying a little bit above the level of the mom and pop investors. Now, that being said, we do manage tons of 2 to 4 unit multifamily. We manage plenty of single family homes. So we can do anything from a single family home up to a medium-sized apartment complex. And my cutoff typically is if it doesn't need on-site management. We're not the team that staffs the office of the apartment complex. We're the team that provides off-site management for the slightly smaller complex.
Yeah, that's a great indicator there. So one thing I was talking to a couple investors about earlier this week. Tell me if you kind of agree with this down there. But one thing that we're really seeing is the 5 to 30 unit sector really seems to be a niche that nobody has really excelled at bringing in processes and buying in that. So you're still competing with your mom and pops when you're talking about the 5 to 30 units. You're not competing with institutional money most of the time, like you said. So it hasn't really hit all the sophisticated investors yet. So I feel like that's a unique market to be in. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, that's a really interesting observation, because what you find on the single family home side of things is a lot of what I refer to as like your lone wolf real estate agent who does some sales, but also manages 5 or 6 or 7 properties. And that's how a lot of people start. I'm not knocking it, but there is some risk built into that business model for the investors who own the properties, because typically the rent, the security deposits, everything in the bank accounts flow through that one person. And if that one person gets sick or injured or incapacitated or killed, it can cause financial nightmares, because they're often the only one with access to those bank accounts. And it can take months to unravel that in the case of a death or something like that. So, but that being said, you're right. There aren't a lot of people who really have the systems and processes in place to take on, to add a 30 unit complex to your portfolio without missing a beat. And so I do like to think that we are that team. We manage about 350 units. And so adding 30, that's kind of a 10% bump. We can absorb that, no problem, even if we have to hire, an additional person on the maintenance side or something like that. Whereas if I'm managing 7 units as an individual, and you ask me to take on 30 more, that's kind of a non-starter.
Yeah. No, in one thing that I think you kind of hit it there is the mom and pops, they're great. And that's how most people get started is buying the one single family or the duplex and house hacking or whatever people want to call it. And we all kind of start there for the most part, but what I find, especially here in the Midwest, is they just don't necessarily understand the investment game as well as people that own several multifamily or several commercial properties. So they take a lot more time to kind of hand holding to get them onboarded onto the management process to really understand why things cost what they do. They're just not as necessarily sophisticated, I guess is probably the best way to say it, of an investor. So everything is more of a question versus them just trusting you as the professional out there in the management field and letting you kind of take that on and go with it.
Yeah, that's a great point. I just had that situation pop up this week. I actually got a referral from a local eviction attorney. He said, "Hey, I've got this lady here. She's doing an eviction, but she owns like 8 units in this complex and she's got 5 vacancies and she's really in over her head and she needs help." So, I spent a lot of time talking to this lady and referred her to a landscaper and a roofer, and she signed a property management agreement. But ultimately, I could tell she was just too emotionally involved with this property. She actually lived in one of the units. Her parents had built these properties. There was drama because of a parcel split. Her brother got the property across the street. She got this one. So now they're looking at each other from across the street. And she eventually decided, I'm just not sure I want to do this. And I was kind of like, what, bullet dodged. Here's your cancellation. No harm, no foul. But I could already tell this was not going to be good because, she was just too attached and too emotionally involved. And the other side of that is when you have 1 or 2 single family homes, absolutely you can self-manage. Even if you have this 7-unit complex and you live in one, sure, you can self-manage that. But what that doesn't enable you to do is scale your portfolio with any level of sophistication like you talked about. And my client who I mentioned, who went from 1 door to 140 doors, he did that because he has property management in place and he doesn't even think about property management. He doesn't spend 30 minutes a week on property management. He's busy building his portfolio. And if you look at that over the span of a 20, 30 year, investing career, the person with property management in place who leverages their time and their resources and their assets to buy more properties is usually going to end up better off, further down the road.
Yeah, they're actually running it like a real business versus just kind of a hobby and feeling, dipping their toes, seeing if they like it. And I tell people all the time, look, you can get into the investing, real estate investment world with 1 unit, sure, but it will bankrupt you pretty quickly. If you're expecting to cash flow like crazy and make all this money, trust me, it's probably not going to happen. You've really got to be able to scale to offset. And once you hit those economies of scale, then you can start really reaping the reward of it. But 1 or 2 units, I mean, if an HVAC system goes out, there goes all your cash flow most of the time for, a year or more if you have 1 or 2 units.
Sure.
So
it's especially with single family homes, they're not really a cash flow plan. They're more of a retirement plan. And you might be making a couple $100 per unit on a single family home rental by the time you pay debt service and everything else. And you're right. So a $4,000 HVAC unit, that's what, 20 months of cash flow.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, there's definitely economies of scale once you're able to scale up. And I'm a firm believer that one of the big pieces of the puzzle that allows you to scale up as a real estate investor is having professional property management in place.
Absolutely. Yep. You've got to have your team. If you don't have your team, sure, you can build your own, but if you're really trying to scale and do this thing and make it, a big business that's going to last long and not wear you out, you've got to have your property management. You've got to have your contractors, your go-to people, your lawyers, your CPAs. or else you will get burnt out very quickly in this
Yeah.
industry.
And, a lot of people have the mindset, well, I'm going to save that 8 or 10% of my revenue and use that to scale up. But the problem is you start, or you allow yourself to work in your business. It takes up all
Yes.
of your time. It's all consuming. You're not working on your business and looking at long-term strategies. You're looking at day-to-day rent collection and accounting and maintenance things that you could just hire somebody to take care of for you. And then you can do the other stuff that's more impactful.
One
Jeff,
of the biggest mistakes I see. Oh, go ahead, Ryan.
I was just gonna not really change topics, but Jeff, I just want to ask you about the structure of your business. You got the brokerage piece where you have about 15 agents. Is that still accurate?
Correct.
And then you got the property management, where you have 350 properties, give or take, like you said. Is there? How are you guys structured? Are the agents just looking at? Are they investor focused and trying to help build the property management? Is there crossover, or is it very separate? How's that look?
That's a great question. And I'll start by describing how we're staffed on the property management side. We're organized by function, and those main functions tend to be leasing. So if it's a vacant unit, it belongs to leasing. That's a pretty easy line to draw in the sand. And then once it's occupied, we have what we refer to as resident services. And so they're dealing with lease renewals and administration and rent collections and things like that. Then, of course, we have maintenance, and then we have accounting. And so those are kind of our 4 pillars. And we have, either full-time or part-time, pretty close to full-time employees in each of those roles, and more than one employee in some of those roles. And there's not a ton of crossover from the agents. We did recently have an opening on the leasing side, and it occurred to me, well, we have 15 agents. Maybe one of them wants to learn leasing, because I think it'll make them a better realtor if they understand the property management side of things. And so we have recently started to kind of cross-pollinate, where most people on property management side are employees, whereas the realtors are 1099 contractors. But we do now have one of the agents on the realtor side is also a leasing agent on the property management side. And like I said, I think there's a lot of synergy there, to be had. But that's part of what I was getting at with some of the risks of the lone wolf agent who's also managing a handful of properties. Is very different. I have a full-time staff. I have sort of backups to me and backups to my backups. And, if I left the country, which I have, on vacation or whatever, everything still runs smoothly. The owners still get their monies. The tenant, who moves out can still get their security deposit. I own the business, I operate the business, but I don't want to make myself a linchpin where everything stops if I'm gone. And it's a very different, mindset from your sort of individual person who's managing a few properties.
Yeah, that's so I guess, was there a certain point in your career when you were starting, it's probably just you and your wife, when you're like, we need to make the shift to, just like you said, where it's not all depending on you? Was there a certain moment that it kind of shifted, or was this always the vision?
Well, it's been really sort of gradual growth on the property management side, but I can think back to probably around 100 doors. At that point, it was kind of just me, and I'm like, I've got to have some help. And I started out with one person who was sort of an admin, person, and then I remember thinking, what takes up the most of my time? Where would I get the most bang for the buck out of hiring someone? And the answer was leasing, for sure. And if you have 6 vacancies a month, that alone is a full-time job, getting the pictures and the listings and the applications and the background checks and the screenings and the showings. It's a full-time endeavor. And so that was one of my first hires, other than just general admin help, is let's take this leasing and sort of systematize it and take it off my plate so that I can focus on the strategy of running and growing my business. And so, probably somewhere around 100 doors, and you've got 2 or 3 vacancies a month at that level, was that a 3% vacancy rate? So that's probably about right. And, at that point, you're going to need somebody to help with leasing, because that's probably the most time consuming. And then not far behind that is maintenance. handling maintenance calls and dispatching vendors and responding to some maintenance calls. Maintenance was probably a quick second to leasing.
Do you guys use, or can you tell us what softwares or services do you guys use for helping you onboard new tenants, background screening? Are you guys using like AppFolio to manage all the properties, bring in ACH payments? What's that look like for you?
We actually use Buildium, which is a competitor to AppFolio. There are three main software suites that probably 90% of PMs are going to use. There's Buildium, there's AppFolio, and there's Propertyware. And there's a few others that are kind of ancillary, but those big three are sort of enterprise-wide systems where you can do everything from rent collections to applications to background checks to the accounting, reports, you name it. And we selected Buildium early on, and I can't really speak to the other systems because I haven't used them, but I can say that Buildium is very scalable. And I can also say that once you have invested yourself for 2, 3, 4, 10 years into a property management software suite, there's really no changing course. So if you're thinking about it and you're very early on managing your first unit or two, put a lot of thought into what software you're going to use and what that software is going to look like when you're not managing 2, but you're managing 200. Is it going to grow with you? Is it going to scale? And is it going to do everything that you need it to do? So you're not having to log into 6 different systems to get the job done.
At what point, roughly, how many units were you at when you decided, hey, it's time we stop using these Excel spreadsheets. We gotta get onto some platform. What did that look like?
I maybe I had a crystal ball or something, but I'm happy to say I had the foresight to adopt Buildium really, really early on with maybe like 2 or 3 units, because I could already see that while I'm collecting payments this way, I'm preparing leases this way, I'm trying to do the accounting this way, and I'm only doing 3 units. But what if I have 30 units, and what if I have 100 units? I need something that's going to grow with us. And so we did a little research. One of the things back then, and I think this is still the case, is Buildium is very affordable when you have a small number of doors. It's very easy to get started. There's not a huge investment that's a barrier to entry. So, but at the same time, Buildium has kind of grown with us over the last 10 years and is very scalable and is very sort of systematized and does 90% of what we need in terms of all those property management processes and procedures.
When somebody's looking for a property manager, say I'm an investor, I've got a few properties. I'm looking for a property manager to take over and start managing these properties. What questions should I be asking you, or what should I be looking for?
I think some of the things we've talked about, like what kind of systems do you use? What kind of systems do you have in place? I would want to know that my property manager has invested in the necessary technology and is not using an Excel spreadsheet, which is prone to error, prone to data entry mistakes, prone to forgetting to do it.
It's old school.
Yeah, exactly. And it's too error prone, too much reliance on human error.
If you can't afford to pay for the management software, that is already a red light, in my opinion.
Yeah. And I would also be cautious of, we invented our own, or, we developed a series of spreadsheets or Google Docs or whatever. There are professional systems out there that are not very expensive in the overall scheme of things. And so I would want to make sure probably that my property manager is using one of these big 3 suites that we mentioned. And there may be 4 or 5 others that might work or might get the job done that I'm not familiar with. So I don't want to suggest that it's these 3 or nothing, but I would want to see that they're systematized, and not just on the software side, but kind of on the process side. How are you organized? How are you staffed? What functions do your staff perform? And, kind of what we talked about before, we've kind of broken it down by, leasing, resident services, maintenance, and accounting. Some people do it by portfolio. They'll have an assistant PM that manages, a tranche of 40 houses or 40 units or whatever, and split it up that way. Any of these business models can work. But what I would be cautious of is the people who are just, we just kind of wing it. I don't know. We don't really have an org chart, No, if, once you scale to a certain level, you need to be working on your business and have a strategy in place and systems in place, and not just, putting out fires all day long.
Yep, I completely agree. And one thing you said earlier, and I just want to step back to it real quick. You mentioned back when you were saying kind of how you built your team out and you thought about putting one of your agents over to the leasing side so that they could understand that or become more aware of how that all works on the management side. And I feel like managing properties as a real estate agent is a huge bonus, honestly. You learn so much about how investors think, what to be looking for, how to ask the right questions, and just really going through that whole process of managing property will make you so much better out there in the field when you're showing houses to clients, and understanding the whole remodel and construction process when you're flipping the properties or getting them ready, because that's just going to give you so much that you can offer clients when you're out there. Like, what things cost, what things to really be looking for, all of that. So one of the biggest things that I could tell people that want to become real estate agents is get out there in the field, help manage a few properties, or do whatever you can to understand everything possible about this real estate.
That's a great point. I assume you guys have some real estate agents who listen. And one of the things I would tell them is certainly a positive is, like, if you get in with the right 5 or 6 investors, those might be the only clients you ever need to work with as a real estate agent. I have one client who's used me to purchase 100 doors. I have other clients who have done 20, 30, 40 doors. And so you don't need 50 clients a year like your traditional retail real estate agent who's kind of one and done. I mean, here's your new home. I'll see you in 7 years. I work with my clients on an almost daily basis, because as soon as they close on property A, they're looking for property B. What are we going to do next? Sometimes there's a little time in between. You might need to, sort of reset, refinance, and raise some capital or whatever. But I would say over half of my sales volume has probably come from the same 10 buyers over the years. And so if you're a real estate agent and you want to work with investors, create that value add, learn about property management, learn about construction, and then you can literally, make a living off the right 10 investors who will be repeat business over and over again.
Yep, absolutely. That's kind of how I started and built my business here in Kansas City as well. I was working with investors and building those relationships and really just taking care of them, being honest, doing the right thing, and year over year, help the same people over and over and over again. It's very nice. It's consistent.
I've never met a real estate investor who only wants to buy one.
Exactly. You are exactly right on that.
So I got a quick question, and then we're going to get to a couple standard questions that we want to ask everybody. We're getting pretty close on time, but so the majority of your management portfolio is for clients, not personal use. I'm assuming if you have tenants that decide they're ready to purchase, you want them to obviously use you and your agents. Do you guys offer any incentives of like, hey, you won't have any like cancellation fees, or do you kind of stay away from that since it's your client's property and you're going to have to fill that vacancy? What does that look like?
More towards the latter. I mean, I have helped a handful of clients over the years maybe buy a home or whatever, but on the one hand, retail sales, first-time home buyers, moving from a tenant to a first-time home buyer, that's not the core of our business model. We're mainly working with the investor buyers. And so there have been a few times where I negotiated maybe an early termination of a lease for a client who was buying a house through us or whatever. But my philosophy is generally we work for the investor. We work for the landlord. And if I give the tenant no penalties and they break their lease 6 months early, well, that's going to cost my client at least, a little gap in vacancy and a new tenant placement fee or whatever. And so my loyalty really lies with the investor and the property owner rather than with the tenant. That being said, that is a potential opportunity for a lot of property managers out there. 350 doors that we manage, you could look at your portfolio and figure out who pays really good all the time and who do we know has a really good job and shouldn't really be a tenant. and that's a potential pool of buyers, maybe for one of your new agents to work with, or something like that. So it is a great concept. I'll be honest, it's probably one that we haven't developed enough in-house.
Right. Well,
Yeah,
you don't, when you're, like you said, the investor is who you owe the fiduciary duty to and stuff like that. You're not trying to take money out of their pocket to put into yours.
Right. But I think there's a way to do
but
it
to change
fairly,
that,
and it's something that you could certainly explore and develop in the right circumstance.
we definitely do it here on our team, and that's one thing that we always offer. But we manage a lot of our own properties too, so it's that unique piece is a little different. But what we'll do is we'll call the individual that might own the property, or if we know that they would like to get this property turned over or raise the rents, there's all different strategies we can use to then say, hey, tenant, if you would like to buy, or if you ever do go buy, we would love to represent you. But we always have that conversation up front with the investor first to let them know, and then make sure that they're okay with it. And if they say yes, then we're absolutely marketing that and making sure that every year we let the tenants know, hey, if you're ever looking to get out, we'd love to. Anytime you can get out, as long as we're representing you, we can do that, and you can get out without having any kind of extra fees. And it is good business. We get quite a few of our tenants to do it.
I agree. There are certainly ways to turn that into a win-win, and it's a great question, and it's a great business idea to explore if you're in property management or sales.
Yeah. Well, Ryan, let's get to the questions.
Yeah. So could you share a personal story of a financial decision you made that had a significant impact on you and your family? And then what did you learn from that experience?
Interestingly, and I'm sure this is a situation that many part-time real estate agents are in. For me, it was the decision to stop working full-time, give up what I think was about a $70K a year salary, and go into real estate full-time. I literally hated my full-time job. It made me miserable. And I had built up my real estate business to a point where I could, but it's still a lot to give up. That's $70K guaranteed.
A lot of money.
That's my health insurance. That's everything. And it was a decision that my wife and I did not take lightly, but it truly kind of transformed our life. I really hit the ground running in real estate. And I remember probably about 6 or 8 months after I left my full-time job, my boss called me, and he didn't come right out and say it, but I could kind of tell he was asking like if I wanted to come back. And I remember thinking, and I don't remember the year, but I remember it was like the end of March. And I remember thinking, I made more money in March than you pay me the entire year. Ooh. I am never coming back. And I didn't tell him that, but that's what I was thinking in the back of my head.
Isn't it crazy how when you're really passionate about what you're doing, how fast you can really excel in that? And it's not always about the money. It's about your happiness, your lifestyle, like what you're really out there looking for. And I talk to so many people that have exact same scenario. It's always hard to leave a W-2 job. It's kind of guaranteed, quote unquote, money. But most people that do take the leap into something that they're really excited about and really looking forward to, within a year, I would say almost always they are just in such a better place.
Yeah, no, it's not easy. You're going to have to boost your ass, but I do caution people, don't jump off the ledge if you've got $200 in the bank. But if you're strategic about it and yes, you've got enough of a buffer and you have enough income from real estate to kind of, tread water until you can, what people fail to take into account is when you go full time from halftime, that's so much more effort and so much more momentum that you're throwing into the business that it can happen quite quickly if you make that leap at the right time.
Yep.
That was great. Great answer. And then the other question, it's about motivation when, times are getting tough and maybe you have to reflect back to when you went full time. What keeps you motivated and keeps pushing you forward?
One of you guys made a great point that it's not always about the money. And I've been fortunate that I make a decent living in real estate, but I've never really been in it for the money. I enjoy helping people. I feel a certain sense of loyalty to my clients to do the right thing for them. I say this all the time. I probably talk people out of buying properties more often than I talk them into it, because I'm like, no,
Yes.
you can do better. You don't want to buy this property. The numbers are wrong. The location is wrong. It's not a property that I particularly want to manage. So
Exactly.
it's not a property that you particularly want to buy. Let's find you something else. Whereas on the retail real estate side, there's so many agents out there. Unfortunately, they give some of the rest of us a bad name when they'll sell you anything, because that's their paycheck for the month, and that's how they feed their family. And if they can get the house under contract, they'll sell it to you because they're never going to see you again. And they know that in the back of their mind. We have a very different business model where most of our clients are repeat clients as buyers, but also daily clients on the property management side. And so, yeah, just doing right by them is a big part of my motivation. And I'm kind of a systems guy. Like, what motivates me is, these things need to get done today, a checklist or what have you. But we've gone way beyond a checklist into these systems and sort of, workflows that need to be completed. And so I would say try to find a way to be motivated by the process rather than motivated by the money.
That's awesome. That is a great outlook and way to look at it. I think you said it great when you're talking about, you've got to look these people in the eyes daily or weekly or monthly, and with them knowing that you sold them this property. So you don't want to go out there and sell them things that you wouldn't buy yourself. And that's what I tell my clients all the time is, I'm not going to sell you anything I want to buy. If you buy it, that's okay. But I'm going to tell you every reason why I wouldn't buy it. And then you get to make that decision on your own. And if we do pull the trigger, I will do whatever it takes to get it to where it needs to be. But don't put it back on me if something else comes up or surprise.
Yeah, but I'm going to put all this in writing in an email.
Exactly.
I told you not to.
So I can send it, screenshot to you as soon as you start getting upset with me.
I told you so. Yep.
Yep. No, we really appreciate it, Jeff. I think that's really it. You've got a great business and definitely want to keep in touch. I think you're doing some amazing things, and we will definitely be sending some business your way. I've actually got a few people I know moving to Tampa. I don't think they've bought a place yet, so I need to probably get you linked up with them if you would like.
Yeah, happy to help. You can find us at copelandmorgan.com. We have a podcast as well. I'll be honest, I haven't done any new episodes in about a year due to some stuff on the personal side, but there's still tons of great content there that's all sort of focused on investing in Florida, investing in the Tampa Bay market. So that's a great place to start. But obviously you can find everything about us at copelandmorgan.com.
Great. Yeah. And thanks for coming on, Jeff. Really appreciate it. And
My pleasure.
Anytime. Service.
Thank you.
20 years of service. I just got out of the Air Force last year. I was active duty in the reserves. So I get it. And yeah, the 20 years, that takes a special person to do it for a full 20.
Yeah, that's a lot of red tape.
Service as well. Yes. So was there anything else you mentioned the podcast and where to find you? Was there anything else you wanted to plug before we hop off here?
No, I think that's it. If anybody just has questions or wants to talk real estate in Tampa Bay, you can reach me through their website. It's Jeff, Jeff, at copelandmorgan.com is my email. Always happy to point people in the right direction, even if I'm not the guy. So.
Yeah, great. And yep, we'll put all your information in either the show notes or the description if you're watching this on YouTube. Thanks again, Jeff, and thanks for listening to the Xplor podcast. Be sure to follow us, and you can find us everywhere where you listen to your podcast or YouTube. So thanks for listening, and have a great day.
Have a great one.
Thanks, guys.